Night of October 24th, 1944. Luzon Strait, the most dangerous submarine hunting ground in the Pacific. USS Tang, commanded by Commander Richard O'Kane, was already a legend. The submarine had sunk more Japanese ships than any other American boat. But that night, O'Kane wasn't stalking targets. He was ripping through a convoy at such close range that even American subcaptains later said it was suicidal. Most submarine manuals insisted on distance. Fire torpedoes at 1,500 to 3,000 yards. Stay deep. Stay silent. Never surface during the attack. O'Kane ignored every rule. He brought Tang to the surface, within 800 yards of an entire enemy convoy. Some ships were so close that Japanese sailors could be seen shouting orders on deck. But Tang's radar had revealed something stunning. The convoy was zigzagging in predictable, rhythmic patterns. O'Kane realized he could place Tang at the exact intersection point where they would turn. A spot where the entire convoy would walk directly into his torpedoes. It was a tactic no training manual had ever considered. No submarine commander had ever tried it, and no one else would dare repeat it. Tang's first salvo tore Japanese ships apart in seconds. Explosion after explosion lit the sea with burning fuel. O'Kane ordered Tang forward right into the chaos, weaving between sinking hulks as machine gun fire raked the water. One Japanese transport tried to ram the submarine, missing by yards. By 2 a.m., the ocean was boiling with fire, oil, and wreckage. Tang had turned a convoy of 5 ships into an inferno, while still on the surface. But O'Kane didn't know that one of the torpedoes he would fire next would circle back toward him and change the fate of every man on board. Before we continue, subscribe if you want more untold and insane World War II stories that history class never covered. By 2:20 a.m., the sea was a burning maze. Tang moved through it like a predator that refused to disappear into the depths. O'Kane stood on the bridge, fully exposed, scanning the flames for one last target. He found it, a large Japanese transport, crippled but not sinking, drifting in slow circles. "Let's finish it," O'Kane said. His officers exchanged uneasy glances. They all knew they were pushing their luck. But O'Kane had a rule. If an enemy ship could still fight, it was still the enemy. Tang's last 2 torpedoes were loaded. The crew prepared tube number 10, a Mark 18 electric torpedo. Quiet, fast, deadly, and unpredictable. Everyone on board knew the rumors. The Mark 18 had a history of failures. Circle runs, premature detonations, depth instability. Nothing official, of course. The Navy kept torpedo defects a tightly guarded secret. But submarine crews talked, and Tang's torpedo men had seen strange behavior from Tube 10 before. "Tube 10 ready," the chief torpedo man called out. The words felt heavier than usual. O'Kane lined up a shot. Distance, 900 yards. Angle, almost perfect. Risk, enormous. But O'Kane trusted his instincts. He had survived dozens of attacks by making decisions others called reckless, and being right every time. Fire. The torpedo shot out silently. No wake, no trail, just darkness swallowing it whole. O'Kane lifted his binoculars, waiting. The seconds crawled. Then, a flash. But not from the target. The officer of the deck shouted, "Skipper, it's turning back." The Mark 18 had malfunctioned. A circle run. The nightmare every submariner feared more than enemy depth charges. O'Kane didn't hesitate. Full ahead. Hard right. Tang roared forward. The engine screamed. The bow lifted as the ship lunged through burning oil. But the torpedo's electric motor was faster than anyone expected. Its homing arc tightened. One man yelled into the night, "She's coming at us." Another whispered, "God help us." The torpedo struck Tang's stern with a deafening roar. The submarine bucked violently, metal shrieking, bulkheads collapsing, the aft compartments flooding instantly. In a split second, the most successful submarine in U.S. history went from hunter to dying wreck. And the men who survived the blast were about to experience one of WW2's most brutal secret ordeals. The blast hurled men through passageways, slammed bodies against steel, and plunged the aft end of the submarine into total darkness. Tang's stern was gone, torn open like a crushed can. Water surged in with terrifying force, roaring down the compartments faster than any watertight door could close. Inside the control room, red emergency lights flickered, illuminating faces twisted in shock. Smoke and sea spray mixed in the air, making it hard to breathe. Sparks rained from ruptured electrical panels. The floor tilted sharply. Tang was sinking stern first. O'Kane shouted, "Blow ballast. Blow every tank." The diving officer spun valves, air hammering through the subsystems. For a moment, the descent slowed, but not enough. The stern was filling too fast. The submarine was heavy, broken, and being dragged down by the very ocean it had dominated for months. Men in the forward compartments fought to seal hatches. Some succeeded, some didn't. The submarine groaned like a wounded animal as water claimed more of her. Tang pitched deeper, darker, colder. In the forward torpedo room, a handful of crew clung to whatever they could hold, trapped but alive. They felt the submarine hit the seafloor, a jarring, metallic crash followed by the sound of settling wreckage. Depth gauges shattered. Bulkheads creaked under pressure. They were 180 feet below the surface. No light, no radio, no rescue coming. The survivors knew what that meant. Escape would have to be done manually. The submarine carried Momsen lungs, primitive rebreathers designed for emergencies. But they were unreliable, terrifying devices. Many submariners feared them more than drowning. Yet they were the only chance. In the darkness, the men prepared. They prayed. They argued. They tried to steady shaking hands. Outside, pieces of Tang drifted upward, an oil slick spreading across the surface, marking the sub's grave. O'Kane and the men on the bridge had been thrown into the sea at the moment of impact. Now they floated in burning fuel, clutching debris, watching the water boil from explosions below. They couldn't see who else survived. They couldn't hear anything over the roar of fire and gunshots from the sinking ships around them. But they all knew the same truth. If captured, they would be taken to Japan. And no American submarine crew had ever returned from Japanese interrogators. Somewhere in the darkness beneath them, the trapped crew took their first steps toward one of the most dangerous submarine escapes in history. In the forward torpedo room, the trapped men braced themselves against the cold steel walls as the submarine groaned under pressure. The compartment was flooding slowly, not enough to drown them immediately, but enough to make the air thick, wet, and colder by the minute. Every breath tasted like metal. Every sound echoed like a countdown. Chief Gunner's mate William Leibold took charge. His voice was steady, but everyone could hear the fear behind it. "Listen up. We're going topside. One at a time. No hesitation." The only path out was the forward escape trunk, a narrow vertical chamber barely big enough for two men. They would climb in, seal the hatch, flood the chamber, equalize pressure, and then blow it open to the sea. If anything jammed, if anyone panicked, if pressure didn't equalize, they'd be crushed in seconds. The men lined up. No one spoke. They put on Momsen lungs, rubber rebreathers that hissed like snakes and tasted like chemicals. The devices were notoriously unreliable. But at 180 feet down, they had no other option. Leibold climbed into the escape trunk first. He shut the hatch behind him. The others listened to the gurgling rush of water filling the chamber. Seconds passed, then a minute, then two. No signal, no bubbles rising past the hull. Nothing. Someone whispered, "God." He didn't make it, but then, faintly, they heard it. 3 taps on the hull, the prearranged signal. He had escaped. One by one, the men followed. Some struggled with the Momsen lungs. Some almost lost consciousness from panic. One sailor froze halfway through the flooding and had to be shoved out by the next man in line. But incredibly, impossibly, 13 men made the ascent. They burst through the surface into a nightmare. Burning oil slicks, sinking Japanese ships, explosions echoing across the waves. and Japanese escorts sweeping the water with spotlights, searching for survivors to capture. O'Kane, drifting on a piece of debris, spotted the first man breaching the surface. He couldn't believe it. Nobody escaped a sunken submarine from that depth. Nobody. But Tang's crew had done it. Then a spotlight hit the water. A Japanese escort was turning toward the survivors. Every man understood instantly. They had cheated death once. They would have to do it again. Kolchak's men had seen magnetic mines. They had seen contact mines. But none of them had ever seen the kind that now floated in the fog ahead. A strange, rounded design with protruding veins, drifting silently like iron jellyfish. These were not part of the official Luftwaffe arsenal. At least, not the publicly known one. The destroyer's forward lookout whispered through the voice tube. Mines drifting upstream. Kolchak froze. A mine floating against the tide made no sense. Unless they had been dropped moments earlier. The fog parted just enough to reveal it. A shape curving across the sky, barely above the waterline, silent, smooth, and gleaming like polished bone. A flying wing, not a bomber, not a fighter. A Horton Ho 229 test article, stripped of markings, operating where it absolutely should not be. Kolchak's XO muttered, "Germans aren't supposed to be testing here. This is a combat zone." The captain stared longer. This wasn't a test. This was a field deployment before the Allies even knew the prototype existed. And worse, the strange mines weren't meant for ships at all. They were meant to track something metallic, hot, and moving at high speed. Something like the new Allied radar array destroyers. And Dahlgren was the first one the Germans had encountered. Kolchak grabbed the bridge phone. "All hands, new threat type. Combat stations. Do not fire unless fired upon. I want to know what we're dealing with." For 2 minutes, nothing moved but the fog. Then the flying wing banked sharply, veins glinting, and released another mine. One that hissed as it dropped, its casing glowing faintly before cooling in the water. This was not a weapon. It was a sensor network. The first distributed minefield in human history. "Captain, they're mapping us." Kolchak's jaw tightened. If he let them finish, the Germans would know exactly how to kill every radar-equipped ship the Allies possessed. So he made a decision that would later vanish from all official records. "Helm, flank speed. We're going through the minefield." His XO spun around. "Sir, you can't outrun naval mines." Kolchak didn't even blink. "I'm not outrunning them. I'm confusing them. If the mines were sensors, then he would give them too much data to handle." The destroyer roared forward, engines howling like wounded metal beasts, and the mines began to wake. The moment Dahlgren surged into the minefield, the calm fog turned into a battlefield of invisible signals. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, a deep, pulsing one vibrated through the hull like a heartbeat. Kolchak gripped a stanchion as the deck shivered. "Report." The radar operator's voice broke. "Sir, those mines aren't mines. They're pinging us. They're scanning our hull resonance, our heat, our emissions, everything." The ship's sonar erupted in a symphony of echoes. Pings came from every direction. The fog lit with faint blue sparks where the devices surfaced for power. It felt alive. Kolchak understood instantly. These weren't weapons. They were a learning machine. One that the Germans would retrieve later to extract data about every Allied radar signature. Destroyers, cruisers, even carriers. "They're teaching the flying wing how to kill us," the XO whispered. Kolchak didn't reply. He couldn't. The minefield wasn't random. It reacted to patterns. When the ship accelerated, the mines swirled into formation. When she turned sharply, they followed the arc. When she powered up the radar, they flared bright. Angry bees responding to a hive tremor. Every movement was being studied. Every vibration was being recorded. The enemy wasn't experimenting. They were training an electronic predator. Kolchak slammed the intercom button. "Engine room. Prepare for power fluctuations. Combat systems. Bring a magnetic decoys online." The chief engineer's voice came through. "Sir, the decoys weren't meant for this." "Neither was I," Kolchak growled. "Do it anyway." The ship spat out metallic pods, designed to confuse magnetically triggered mines. But instead of detonating, the German devices changed course, clustering around the decoys like moths around lanterns. It worked for about 3 seconds. Then the flying wing swooped overhead. Silent, predatory, too fast for the gunners to track, and bathed the water in a sheet of ultraviolet light. The mines ignored the decoys and turned back toward the ship. They had learned. The XO whispered, "Sir, they're updating in real time." Kolchak stared into the electric blue fog, realizing the truth. This wasn't the first electronic hunt in naval history. It was the first adaptive one. And if he couldn't break the machine's learning cycle, it would follow them forever. The sea around Dahlgren churned as the adaptive mines closed in. No longer drifting, no longer curious. Now they moved with purpose, with intelligence. Kolchak felt the deck tilt as the helmsman tried to keep distance between the ship and the nearest cluster. "Sir, they're matching our course changes within half a second," the XO warned. "They're predicting us." That word, predicting, was the part that chilled him. The Germans hadn't just set up a trap. They had created a battlefield that learned environmental behavior, storing acoustic and electromagnetic data and passing it upward, straight to the flying wing. A primitive AI network. In 1945, Kolchak stepped into CAC, where the radar screen was drowning in blooming shapes, ghostly circles converging on the ship like hungry jellyfish. "We can't outrun it. We can't outmaneuver it," the XO said. Kolchak nodded, because the solution wasn't to escape the system. It was to break its mind. He leaned over the communications officer. "Hatch me into all emitters, radar, sonar, radio, everything that can broadcast." The officer blinked. "All at once, sir?" "Yes." This time the crew didn't question him. Fear had stripped away hesitation. The emitters whined to life, each one on a different frequency. Kolchak inhaled deeply. "We're going to overload its learning cycle. If it's tracking patterns." He checked the rapidly merging echoes. "Then we'll become P-LESS." He slammed his fist down. "Broadcast everything. Randomized sweeps. Noise, pulses, static tones. I want this ocean screaming." A second later, Dahlgren came alive like a machine having a seizure. The air vibrated. The hull thrummed. The fog around the ship rippled as sonic waves blasted outward in chaotic bursts. No rhythm, no frequency stability, just pure, impossible data. The mines reacted instantly. Some drifted away like confused animals. Others spun in circles. A few dropped beneath the waves, overwhelmed. And many simply froze, unable to adapt. For the first time, the swarm hesitated. The XO stared at the screens. "Sir, it worked. We broke the pattern recognition." Kolchak shook his head. "We only stunned it." Because overhead, the flying wing returned, banking smoothly, almost gracefully, cutting through the distortion like it understood what had happened. And then, it activated a new search beam, one they hadn't seen before. One aimed directly at Dahlgren's bridge. Kolchak whispered, "It's learning faster than we can confuse it." And then the loudspeaker shrieked, "Incoming!" The flying wing dropped out of the cloud deck like a guillotine blade, silent, sleek, and predatory. Its leading edge glowed faintly as the new sensor beam locked onto Dahlgren's bridge windows. Kolchak didn't flinch. He'd stared down things in the Pacific that should have killed him. Torpedoes, kamikaze, storms. But nothing had ever felt this intelligent. "All batteries, fire at will," he ordered. The deck erupted. Twin 40mm Bofors barked fire into the sky. The 5-inch gun roared, hurling explosive shells upward. Tracer rounds clawed at the clouds like furious, red-hot fingers. But the flying wing moved like it already knew where every shell would be. It slid through the barrage with impossible smoothness. No wasted motion, no hesitation. The crew watched in disbelief. "It's predicting our fire corrections," the gunnery officer said, voice hollow. The wing dove lower. The mines, now recovering from the chaotic data blast, began drifting inward again, slow, cautious, learning. Kolchak saw the entire system closing around them. Skybrain, Sea-Brain, the Dahlgren dead center. He knew what the Germans had built. Not a weapon. A prototype ecosystem. Self-correcting. Self-learning. Self-defending. The crew braced as the flying wing passed barely 50 meters overhead. The wind sheared, knocking men off their feet. But it didn't drop a bomb. Instead, it tagged the ship. A brief, bright pulse struck Dahlgren's bow, like a camera flash made of electricity. Sensors, data mark, target confirmation, and now the mines reacted fast. They accelerated, not drifting, not hunting, charging. Kolchak grabbed the bridge mic. Engine room, full reverse. Give me max wash. Turn the sea against them. The ship lurched violently as the propellers reversed, churning the water into a violent, chaotic vortex behind the hull. The charging mines hit the turbulence and spun off course, some flipping, some detonating prematurely, some smashing into one another. Explosion after explosion tore the sea open behind them. The crew cheered, briefly, because then the radar screamed. The wing is coming back, and it's diving this time. Kolchak turned toward the bridge windows just as the fog lit up with the glow of the descending aircraft. He whispered the truth none of them wanted to face. This isn't a trap anymore. It's execution protocol. The Dahlgren had seconds left, unless someone could outthink a machine built to outthink everything. And Kolchak already knew what had to be done. Something reckless, something suicidal, something only a man could do, because no machine would ever calculate it. Helm. He steadied himself, prepared to ram the sky.